Good afternoon, everybody. We're just waiting for the participants to stabilise on the webinar and then we'll get started. Welcome to those joining our MRC applicants transition to the new funding service webinar. Just waiting for one more minute for participants to join the webinar. Thank you very much to everyone who's joined this afternoon. My name is Sarah Collinge. I'm the Head of Funding Services at the Medical Research Council. And I'm joined today by a panel for MRC colleagues who will join me in helping to answer your questions today. If they'd like to quickly introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Jess Bonham and I am within the Population Systems Medicine Board.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Pan. I'm Head of Programme for Training and Careers.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sue Ming. I'm the Head of Programme for the Molecular and Cellular Medicine Board.
Good afternoon. I'm Anna Kinsey. I'm Head of Programme for the Infections and Immunity Board.
Hi everyone, I'm Charles Evans. I'm a Programme Manager in the Training and Careers team at the MRC.
Good afternoon everyone, I'm Sarah Reynolds and I'm the MRC Research Funding Policy and Delivery Manager.
Hi, I'm Rosie Timbrell. I'm a Programme Manager for Peer Review.
Thank you all very much, panel. We'll see you later on in the webinar. So our plan first is to give you a presentation. And that will take about 20 or 30 minutes, and then we'll be into question and answer session. So this webinar is about UKRI's new funding service and using it for some MRC opportunities. We may refer to that as TFS throughout the webinar, TFS standing for the new funding service. If you do have questions, please use the Q&A functionality to ask your questions during the presentation. If you see questions you'd like to have answered, you are also able to upvote those questions to make them more likely for us to answer them. We may answer your questions by typing responses, or we might answer them verbally during the Q&A session. And if we don't get round to answering your question, then we will also be publishing both the recording of this session and the slides we'll be presenting, plus the question and answers, both typed, spoken, and subsequently able to be answered after the session. So look out for that through the UKRI website, and we will circulate to the participants as well. So just to remind you what is happening now within UKRI and MRC, in that we are introducing a new funding service for applicants, research officers, reviewers, panel members and ourselves to all work together in a simpler and better way to deliver funding to the research community. And our big aim is to have a single consistent service that's better for everyone to be using. And we're now getting quite far along that journey towards our vision. This webinar today is particularly about applications to the Medical Research Council. and to emphasise that most applications to MRC are now using this new funding service. This particular webinar is to provide updates on a few of our opportunities that are coming up now in terms of preparing applications. So this is particularly the MRC fellowships and MRC responsive mode research board opportunities that are live now and will be closing for you in January 2024. So that includes opportunities for clinical fellowships and also for the Infections and Immunity Board, Molecular and Cellular Medicine, Neurosciences and Mental Health, and Population and Systems Medicine. So these are the particular opportunities that we're providing you advice and guidance on applying to today. This is some information about the key timelines and deadlines that you need to be aware of for these particular funding opportunities using the funding service. So they're all live now. They all opened on the funding service on the 12th of October, and they're working towards application closing dates at the start of January. So the responsive mode boards, the closing date for applications is the 10th of January 2024, and for the clinical fellowships, the closing date is the next day, the 11th of January 2024. Please make sure, if you want to apply, that you submit your application by the relevant closing dates. Beyond the closing dates for applications, you can see an indication of the timeline of what will happen after you apply and when funding decisions will be reached for these opportunities. So how do you go about applying using the new funding service? The first thing you need to do is to find the relevant opportunity on UKRI's funding finder on our website. All of these opportunities we are talking about have their own funding finder page, which gives you all of the key information and the timeline for that funding opportunity. It also includes the Start Application link, where you can start to prepare your application using the new funding service. There are some videos now available about how you search for and apply for opportunities using the UKRI funding finder and the funding service, and they'll be put in the chat during the session today if you want links to those. The funding opportunities on the funding finder are so important because they give you all of the key information that you need in order to be able to apply for the funding opportunity. It's organised into helpful sections that's shown on the left-hand side here, so such as who can apply, what we're looking for in terms of the opportunity, and in particular how to apply emphasised here, which gives you all of the instructions about how to prepare your application using the new funding service. Critically, all of the questions that you'll be asked in the funding service are shown in the how to apply section of the funding finder. So you can find out an awful lot of information about how to prepare your application before you even need to go into the UKRI funding service and start the application. We also give you information on the funding finder funding opportunity page about how we will assess your application and key contact details for where to get help and advice. As I've mentioned at the start of the webinar today, we are talking about some upcoming applications in the funding service, and it's very important that you navigate to the right funding opportunity for the right research opportunity and opportunity type that you need to apply for. So, for example, if we're talking about applications to MRC's responsive mode research boards, we have 4 of those research boards, but each of those 4 boards also offers 4 different types of grants that you can apply for. These include the research grant, the new investigator research grant, the partnership grant, and the programme grant. Each of those has its own page on the funding finder and its own start application link to create your application. If we're talking about the clinical fellowship opportunities, there are 3 opportunity types available to you at different career stages. We have the pre-doctoral clinical research training fellowship, the postdoctoral clinical research training fellowship, and the clinician scientist fellowship available for applications closing on the 11th of January. We organise the applications in this way because this allows us to tailor the questions you see in the application to the type of award you're applying for. But it does mean it's very important that you choose the right opportunity from the beginning and select the right start application link, because you can't change this later once you've started your application. So please make sure you are applying for the right type of funding and following the right application process. Once you choose the start application link, you will be moved through into creating an application in the UKRI funding service. You may have to create an account first if you've not used the service before, but this is the sort of view you will get as you come into the funding service. And it gives you sections of the application to complete. As I mentioned, the aim very much is for the guidance and questions to be consistent, clear, and all in one place, reflecting the assessment criteria. Once you create your application, your research office will have visibility as soon as you've started that process, so they can support you in preparing your application. The design of the service is that we ask for information only once throughout the application and make sure we really think carefully about the information we're asking you to provide. If you have applied to us before, you will notice that there are fewer attachments that you need to provide with the application. So it's much more of a case of entering your text and images directly into the service rather than uploading separate documents. Our aim is to provide you with a simple and accessible interface to do this, and give you automatic checks on what you're doing. So for example, questions have word counts against which the length of the application, the question you're allowed to complete in your application. So the service will tell you if you're within the word count that's allowed for that section. One of the first things you'll do when you've started your application is to fill in the applicant details of everyone who's involved in your application in a section called the core team. And a reminder that UKRI has introduced some new names for the roles of people you can include within your application, and they may not be exactly the same as the names for roles you might have used in the past. But our reason for doing this is to widen the diversity of people and ideas that can be funded as part of our applications and provide a standardised naming for roles across UKRI. So all of the names on the right-hand side are now being used in inner opportunities on the funding service. And I've said you will find them and enter them into the core team section of the application. Key updates to note is that if you'd used the term in the past, principal investigator, that's now been replaced by project lead. We have now a role for international co-leads, which is a separate role that you can now select if you have international participants in your application. We also have more diverse roles like grant managers, professional enabling staff, which all help to better reflect the types of people involved in research grant applications. So as well as completing details of the applicants, you can then move on to complete the other sections of the application, which often require you to respond in text or with images. And as you go through each question, you can open up the section, you can see the guidance that we've given about how to answer that question and what we're looking for. And that will appear directly above the text box where you can complete your answer, along with any formatting or other things that you would like to provide with your response to that section of the application. For very few sections, and they are reducing all the time, we do sometimes ask you to upload a file, and on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the sort of format that you would see if you are asked to upload a file in terms of the response to the application, where you can navigate to select a PDF and add it to the application. As you work through and complete each section, you will be asked to mark that you have completed that section and save it. If you've done that, you can always go back and edit the sections again. You can untick the mark complete section. That will allow you to make changes up to the point that you carry on and finalise your application and submit it to your research office. So if you are a new user to the funding service, a few tips that we'd like to share with you. Already mentioned that you may, if you haven't already used the service, need to register for a funding service account. It's not the same as your JES account if you'd had one of those in the past in terms of interacting with UKRI. If you're the lead applicant, we do ask you to complete your equality, diversity and inclusion profile on setting up an account. Because your applications cannot be sent on to the research office unless you've addressed that section of your account. You don't have to answer all the questions, but you do need to choose what information you wish to disclose or not disclose to us. At this stage of development of the funding service, our advice is that the application should be created by the project lead rather than any other member of the project team. That's because the editing rights very much sit with the person who created the application, and it's best at this point in time that is the project lead. But as soon as you start your application, your research office will have visibility, and we are starting to already introduce features for the research office to be able to edit as well. That's coming through over the next couple of months. But you will need to allow time for your research office administrator to approve the application when you submit it to them, and they need to do the final steps to submit it to MRC. So please make sure you allow time for the research office to perform what they need to do in time for the closing date. Because it's a new service, we're interested in all of your feedback about anything working well or not so well. And there are opportunities within the service itself to click on a feedback link and provide any sort of feedback that you'd like to on how the service is working. Some more tips and things to prepare for if this is the first time you've used the new funding service. We are using some application questions that have been developed across UKRI. So it's worth familiarising yourself with some of these new core application questions. I will show you a little of them later on in the webinar, but they are all published on the UKRI website. And as I emphasised, in that funding finder page, that's where you can see all of those questions. As part of those core questions, we ask about the team's capability to deliver the application, and we now ask for that in a narrative way in something called the resume for research and innovation format. And that replaces traditional CVs that you might have provided in the past. So again, if you've not provided that kind of information in that format before, that's something that's worth looking into early in preparing your application. Other things to be aware of, you will not be able to nominate reviewers for your application. We will, in terms of the expert reviewers, we will be sourcing all of those rather than using any suggestions that the applicants would provide. I wanted to emphasise that using the funding service, we aren't returning applications to you after they've been submitted. There's no opportunity for us to do that or for you to correct or add information after the submission's been made. So if your application isn't in a form suitable to be assessed, then it will be rejected. So please do make sure you follow the guidance and understand what you need to do before you decide to click submit and send us your application. The new funding service is developing all the time. So these are just some updates of things that have changed and are being introduced for this round of applications moving forward to the closing dates in January. So for these opportunities, you provide your information about the vision and approach for the application within the application itself according to a word count. This is a change from some earlier opportunities where we asked for the vision and approach to be uploaded as a PDF document. So this is now an integrated part of the application, and you can include a selection of images and other formatting to illustrate your vision and approach. You can, anytime you want to sort of understand how your vision and approach with embedded images will appear to the assessors, you can click on the Read Application tab to view exactly what your application is going to appear like. What you see when you're preparing the application in the funding service is exactly what the assessors will see. So you can manage the response however you want to in order for it to appear well to the assessors. Some other updates. We have now a new section to improve the way that you provide us with project partner information. So in these opportunities, there is a structured section available for you to detail who your project partners are. That's in terms of giving us their names and details of the partnership. We still ask you to provide, as well as the summary information of the project partners, a PDF, email or letters or emails of support are still required as an uploaded PDF document. But all the other details about the project partners can now be provided within the funding service application itself. Just to remind of who project partners are, a project partner is a third-party organisation who provides specific contributions to your application and your future project, either in cash or in kind. We do ask that you only enter details of genuine project partners to the application that are making a specific contribution, and you should only upload letters of support from those project partners. Another update is around an enhancement to the funding service, is around the co-editing functionality, which we're bringing through to allow the research office staff to help applicants prepare their applications. This is being released in two parts. The first part will allow research office staff to be able to edit sections of the application at that very final stage, just before it's sent to the research councils. But before the end of the year, we are expecting a further release to happen that will allow the research office to co-edit with the applicants at any point during preparation of the application. We have been updating the research offices about this functionality recently, so please do take advantage of these new features that should be coming through before these applications need to be submitted to MRC. We have some experience now of applicants using the funding service for these opportunities. This is the second time we have run the research boards and the MRC clinical fellowships using the new funding service. So I wanted to give you a flavour of some of the things to avoid in terms of errors that we have seen in applicants so far. One mistake that we have seen, as I mentioned earlier, is applying for the wrong opportunity type. So not choosing the right start application link from the right funding opportunity on the funding finder. This can lead to, for example, if you wanted to apply for a research grant, if you choose a program grant opportunity, then your application right from the beginning is going down the wrong format. So that's definitely a major mistake to avoid. Please do choose the right opportunity type for the type of funding you're applying for. We've seen that applicants sometimes haven't given the application a suitable title in the funding service. They have used an acronym or a very brief, not very meaningful title for the application. It's called sometimes application name within the funding service. But remember, the name or title that you give your application in the funding service may be published in the future, so it should be a meaningful title reflective of the research that you want to carry out. In a few places in the application, we ask you to complete a template, a standard template, and upload that to the application. This is in particular in sections of the application that relate to research involving animals. Sometimes applicants have not used the template that we're asking them to, but the template link is available within the question, both on the funding finder and within the funding service. So if you're answering a question, please do check if there is a template format that you need to follow, and if there is a template, please use the template. A specific thing for fellowships, I wanted to emphasise, all fellowships require you to have a sponsor or a supervisor, depending on the type of fellowship you're applying for. And we do ask you to list that person within the core team and include them as the type professional enabling staff. We haven't always seen that happening in fellowship applications. A few more issues we'd like you to avoid if possible, please, including inappropriate project partners within your application. Please do consider carefully who the genuine project partners are that you want to include. And remember that they must be providing a significant and defined contribution to your project or your fellowship. It's helpful to understand that not all of your collaborators are project partners. You may have some collaborators that are more informal in nature, that are, working with you on an academic basis, providing advice, guidance, and support, but they're not providing a defined and significant contribution. Those more informal or marginal collaborators do not need to be named as project partners on your application. Please do focus on the most significant collaborations as project partners. We have seen some applications where applicants have attempted to include the same individuals within their application core team and listed them as project partners. Please do not do this, as it's not allowed. Individuals must be either one thing or the other. They're either an applicant in the core team or they are a project partner. They cannot be both. We've also seen applicants attempting to include project partners that are from the same organisation as themselves or another member of their core team, one of their co-leads. Again, it's not permitted to include a project partner from your own organisation or from a co-lead organisation. And the opportunity that we give to upload letters or emails of support from project partners, please do not use this as a way to provide additional documents or letters with your application that are not from the project partners that are genuine. We have seen various costings, quotes, or other types of documents uploaded there. Please do not misuse that part of the application. And for all of these errors that I've mentioned above, please do take care to avoid them, because any of them could lead to your application being rejected. For those that have used applied to the research councils before, just wanting to emphasise some information that is no longer required with your application. And if we aren't asking for it within the funding opportunity and the funding service, then we do not require it anymore. So these are just some examples of information no longer necessary. We do not require a cover letter with your application. You can use the related applications question in the funding service, or you can send us sensitive information via the help desk. We do not want CVs and publication lists of the traditional type. We want you to use the capability to deliver question. We do not need an industry collaboration framework form. There is a question within the funding service to provide that information. And as already discussed, other types of letters of support, if we haven't specifically asked you for it, we only really need project partner letters, and for fellowships, research organisation support letters. And a few other examples there of information that we do not need with your application. This is a quick example of some of the core areas or core questions that we see now for the application and how it's broken down in the funding service. The very standard areas are the vision of the project, the approach to the project, capability of the applicants and team to deliver the project, resources requested, and ethical considerations. As well as those very standard core sections, there are additional questions you'll see according to the opportunity, and disciplinary specific questions for MRC around ethics and industry collaboration. So this is very much the research core questions that you'll see to complete. On the fellowship side, they're very similar, but just wanting to emphasise, because this is a fellowship, we also have a standard career development question within the application. And within a fellowship, the capability question is very much focused on the fellowship applicant rather than that wider team. Because the specific opportunities for fellowships are clinical fellowships, we have some specific questions in the application there to ask about your clinical experience and training to look out for. Moving on through the application, we've already touched a little on the capability to deliver in this new narrative format, the resume for research and innovation. Reminding you again, this is how we assess your capability to do the project you're applying for, and that it replaces all other forms of CVs that we might have asked for in the past. We have 1,000 words there for you to highlight your most relevant skills and experience, and that can be either for an individual or across a team. And if it is a team, we're looking for an integrated response to that question, and a selective decision about how for larger teams to represent, the most compelling and important examples that you have of skills and experience from right across the team. You can include your project partners within the capability section if you would like to. If they add important capability to your team, then we want to know about that. There are some additional words available for additions to the skills and experience. These can be any other important factors that you want the assessors to consider, such as career breaks or impacts of COVID-19. There's a range of things that you can include in that section. But there is considerable guidance available across UKRI about how to go about completing this type of information. And we will be reviewing how that's working and how assessors are finding it, and updating in response to feedback. Not directly about the funding service, but just a reminder that we do have some new policies across MRC about embedding diversity in research design. And so this is asking you to consider all aspects of diversity in applications coming to us. This has been a requirement since the 1st of September. We're asking applicants to consider the characteristics of population groups or subgroups who could benefit from the research being proposed, and to include those groups. And within the application, there are opportunities for you to describe the approaches that you're taking to diversity and inclusion of groups within the research. We are continuing to fund the best well-designed applications, and if you need to request costs to help support aspects of diversity in research design, then please do request those costs and justify them. So yes, we're beyond now the first implementation of this policy, which was in September. But yeah, so we're continuing to further integrate this policy as we go into these applications coming into the January closing dates, and asking you to say, address the question of how you're approaching diversity and inclusion within your studies, and to justify the approach that you're taking. So just a few comments on what happens after you apply. If you submit an application and you are invited to, we will go out and seek reviews for your application from external experts. If you're applying to one of our research boards, we will potentially invite you to respond to those comments using the new funding service. And you would have around 500 words for each of the reviews of your application in order to respond to us. If you're applying for a fellowship, your response would be through an interview process rather than needing to sort of write a response in the funding service. And so, yes, after your application, we'll be going into expert review and then informing you as to the progress of your application. If you're moving on to the next stages of the process, being invited to respond to review comments or to attend an interview, for example. Keep an eye out that, as I've mentioned throughout, the new funding service is continuing to develop. So if you're interested in future opportunities beyond these ones we're discussing now, which have the closing dates in January, because the funding service will continue to develop, please look at those future opportunities in detail as they're released, as the requirements may have shifted slightly from this presentation to future opportunities. So make sure you're checking the most up-to-date information before you apply. Increasingly, resources available to support you, a range of videos and other materials on the UKRI website, which we will post in the chat for you. They're focused on different audiences, like the applicant audience, research offices, and also now reviewers and panel members having resources to explain how they use the new funding service. And finally, there's plenty of ways to stay up to date or give us feedback. So there's a newsletter which is published quarterly about developments in the new funding service. We have regular webinars beyond ones for applicants like this, which are for other audiences like the research offices. You can sign up to be involved in user research and give feedback through the service itself. And always our website is a good source of the various ways to learn more and to get involved. Finally, to end on how we will help you prepare an application, probably your first port of call is your research organisation to help and assist you with preparing your application and any internal deadlines that there may be. For more general questions, please contact the relevant MRC team to get advice, and the funding opportunity will give you the most relevant contact details in terms of the MRC to contact. And then finally, technical issues relating to the UKRI funding service. We have a help desk for those, which you can contact either via email or by phone. So thank you for your attention to the presentation. We're now going to move on to the Q&A session.
Yes, thank you. So I think we're going to start with Sarah Reynolds. So the first question for you, Sarah. The project lead and research office have view and edit rights. Is there any way for other office administrators helping to build the application to be given edit access?
Yeah, so as I understand, research office staff with administration status with funding service account should be able to view all applications from your organisation and be able to edit all sections when you submit an application for approval. So I don't think it's limited to one member of staff, as long as they've got the right relevant administration access.
So there's a similar question about editing rights to project supervisors. Is that the same case?
So yeah, so co-editing rights at the moment has only been rolled out to research officers, like Sarah mentioned in the presentation earlier. So supervisors currently don't have that co-editing access.
Great, thank you. For the MRC research grant scheme, there are two parts of the question. Number one, does the 6-page limit still apply to the approach section? And number two, is there a restriction on the number of figures that can be included in the approach section?
Yeah, so the approach section is, so now it's no longer a PDF. It's now got a character limit instead. So the word limit for the approach section is now 3,000 words, which for information based on the equivalent page limit is around 500 words per page. So it's essentially the same, just in a word limit form rather than a page limit. And then the second question, sorry, was that about the images?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, so there isn't a cap, as far as I'm aware, for images, but the guidance clearly states to use these sparingly. So where you're unable to convey important information that can't be easily put into words, then yes, please do use images, but do think about how you're using them and use them sparingly.
Thank you. And one last question that I think is directed towards you. TFS was trialled recently by the EPSRC. They received an unprecedented amount of submissions, which means difficulties to find reviewers, review submissions on time, etc. This will likely require managing the budget allocated and perhaps move some submitted grants for the next panel. Will the MRC take some measures in anticipation of a surge in demand? Yeah, so that's a good question. So this isn't the first time that we've rolled out response mode and fellowships through the funding service. So we have already run around through each. EPSRC and a few other councils have always operated slightly differently to the way the MRC operate with always open rounds. So I think sort of they've had to shift to closing deadlines in using the funding service. So I think this has resulted in an unexpected increase in volumes from the community, I think, with having deadlines now.
We don't expect that increase in volume. I have just quickly checked the application numbers from the last round, and they didn't seem to be too different to what we've had previously. But if anyone else wants to jump in there, please do.
Yeah, so for the Population Systems Medicine Board, we saw a normal number of applications to the September deadline that gets adjudicated in March.
And I can just reiterate, for the previous clinical round, we also saw a similar numbers, so manageable.
Thank you. I think, Sarah, this might stick with you actually for the next question, but say if not. Regarding research involving human tissues or biological samples, are commercially available iPSCs included here or not?
I don't know if I can answer that.
Possibly not one for you. Okay.
I can have a go at that. So commercially available iPSCs are you can use them without having to have a particular license within the UK. So in terms of needing to have a letter of support, I think that's what the question is around, whether or not you need to get a letter of support to show that the feasibility of getting that iPSC. I don't think you do, because you can buy it commercially. So they're a commercial supplier, so you won't need to have the same letters of support from somebody, or have a project partner who can supply that resource.
Thank you, Jess. Sarah, sorry, there has been a follow-up to a previous question you answered, going back to the editing rights. Will there be a move to allow access to an application to research development staff who don't have institutional administrator access?
So the what's been rolled out currently is the kind of first iteration of editing rights. So I can't give timeframes as to when this is going to be expanded beyond just research office administration staff, but it is expected that co-editing will be expanded. For example, to co-leads and other staff, but I can't give details at the moment as to what that will look like and who exactly will have that access.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that one, Rosie? Part of that, though, is a question for research officers themselves in terms of how they want to manage, if it's research office type staff, but not of the administrator status. Part of that is how, say, research organisations choose to allocate accounts and set up statuses and things like that. So we can't really talk in too much detail about what they might want to do there. But I am aware that there's some new functionality for groups within the research office function. So, you know, groups of staff could potentially have different levels of access and different types of status. So that's something probably to follow up with the research organisations concerned about how they want to set that side of things up using the new funding service.
Thanks, Sarah. This is a more generic question I think a few people could answer. How can I avoid duplication in project partner section and R4RI when talking about what the project partners will contribute to the project?
Yeah, I can answer that. So when you're talking about how the project partner is going to contribute to the whole project, they do describe how they will integrate with the other team members and how the project partner is going to contribute to that. The letter of support from the project partner should really be a statement that's confirming what they will contribute with. And I'll hand over to Jess a bit for some extra information.
Yeah, just included within the R4RI, the why that particular contribution from the project partner is critical to delivery of the outcomes, I think, is what you would include in the R4RI section.
I'm wondering if we've lost Rosie. I can pick up some questions if that's the case. One that looks like it's been voted. So for capability to deliver, Should outputs be referenced within the narrative as hyperlinked DOIs, or should they have endnote numbers relating to the references section in the overall application? The general R4I guidance doesn't mention the references section in the funding service. When referencing outputs, such as publications, you should provide these as digital object identifiers, so DOIs, which can be hyperlinked to the publication where possible. So this will also help you save space in your R4I response. And I think I can provide a link in the chat to where you can get more information on this. So I'll go for the next question then. So can we have some clarity regarding project partners? If someone is named in the approach as bringing in expertise in a specific technique, protocols or assay that the project lead or project co-leads don't have, can they be included as project partners even if this contribution doesn't require costing?
Well, they can be included. Project partners can be included that make no financial contribution, that make an in-kind contribution. But I think, yeah, it really depends on how fundamental that relationship is to the project being deliverable. You know, if it's something that the project is unfeasible without, then you could include them as a project partner. But you know, they are still integral to your application if they're described as a collaborator within your approach section. So this is a question of judgment. I don't know if any of my other panel colleagues would give advice on that subject.
I think what you said is absolutely true, but also remembering that project partners can't be from your own institution. So it's a given that you will seek help and advice from your colleagues within your research organization. And you can reference that a little bit without making somebody a project partner. So common sense.
It's just about demonstrating the integrity. There's a sort of how integral they are to the actual application, making that point clear as appropriate. So there's no hard and fast rules. It depends upon, you know, the level of contribution that they're providing beyond your home institution, of course.
Thanks. I'm going to just pick up another question. Oh, sorry, things are moving around. So someone else has just followed up regarding the supervisor access. So is it possible, therefore, to have a blank application to see what is required for them as a supervisor, since the supervisor role is crucial? So we don't have a blank application form as such that you can download, but if you go into the funding finder advert opportunity on the website and go down to the how to apply section, that section is essentially a carbon copy of what you'll see in the funding service.
Yes, just to add to Sarah, building on that it's not just the questions, but the word counts and everything that you need is available within the funding opportunity.
Okay, I'll pick up another question now. Sorry, my screen is moving around. How forward-looking should the capability to deliver statement be? Do you expect it to explicitly relate past experiences, contributions to the activities of the applicant and team, have said that they'll deliver for this particular project, or should they focus solely be on past contributions and experiences that demonstrate capability, but without discussion of the specifics of what is going to be delivered on the project? Yeah,
I think there's a balance there overall. I mean, you know, it clearly has to rely upon your past experience and your capability, the track record of the team that you have involved, but it should be somewhat forward-looking as well to be able to, you know, how the past leads to what you're going to take forward. So I think, you know, there should be a strong demonstration of what's gone previously, but, you know, pointing somewhat to the future and how the assembled team will be able to deliver that. So again, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's sort of more a common sense approach to demonstrate that you have all the abilities to deliver across the piece from past experience and then moving forward.
Okay, so next question. Let's move again. Could we have some extra clarity regarding project partners? If someone is named in the approach as bringing in expertise of the specific, if I've already asked this question. Yes, sorry. Okay, next one. Following up on the office administrator access, it's more gaining access at local departmental level rather than at central research office where they do the final review. I think we've already.
Yeah, I think we've covered that. Another answer, Sarah.
Next one, the reproducibility and statistical design is a substantial section. Can this be fitted into the vision?
Yes, we do. Well, actually, it's in the approach. We ask you to provide the detail on statistical design within the approach section of the application, and we have designed the word count that will allow you to do that. Specifically, the guidance is to use around 500 words addressing reproducibility and statistical design. That was equivalent to the page that used to be advised in the guidance. If you do not want to use 500 words on reproducibility and statistical design, then you should prepare an approach section that is not not using the full 3,000 words that you can potentially use for that section. That's the advice that we're giving right now.
Sarah. So another question on supervisors. So can your supervisor be listed in the core team and under supervisor, or only one? I'm not really sure what that's asking, but essentially, if you have your supervisor needs to be included and the core team as hopefully I get this right. Is it specialist staff?
Professional enabling
staff. That's it.
And you can list more than one. Don't know if anyone from training careers.
Okay, next question then. As a non-UK resident living in Ethiopia, can I apply? Is medical education, quality improvement, social accountability and accreditation part of UKRI themes? We have a collaboration within a UK university. So I think that's quite specific to your sort of research project and area. So I'll respond to you in writing as to who you can contact to discuss your project in a bit more detail. But we don't have strict like residency criteria for our eligibility criteria within MRC. So as long as you have an appropriate contract with an eligible research organisation, you would be eligible to apply for our funding. Next question. The guidance to approach for statistics is that we can use the vision section. I don't understand that question.
I would emphasise again to look at the approach question for providing details of statistical design. We have two sections there. There's a vision question and an approach question now. With each has a word count, 500 words for vision, which should be high level information about the purpose why you want to do the research and the impact it could have. And then a much larger section for approach, which is where we would expect the more detailed description of how you would carry out the research to be given, and details of reproducibility and statistical design within that section.
I don't think there's any other questions. I think one of the questions is a repeat of the one that I just responded to.
Thank you, Sarah, for taking over, sharing the questions. Any final questions, please do submit them in the next minute or so before we close the webinar. I'm not seeing any new questions. In that case, Thank you very much for attending our webinar today, and thank you to the panel for helping to answer the questions. Oh, I think I've just seen a new question. It's not a question. Thank you again, everybody. And if you are preparing applications for the January closing dates, I hope that goes well for you. And please do contact us if you need any more information and assistance when you're putting your applications together. I'm going to close the webinar 5 minutes early.